Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of You've Gotta See This, your guide to what's playing in theaters and at home. I'm your host Brad, joined by my co-host Blake. Blake, how's your week been?
It's been pretty good. It's been a roller coaster of quality this week in the theater.
Oh yeah, that goes without saying for sure. We're going to get into some wildly different types of movies this week. First, we're going to start off with the biggest movie that's come out in I don't know how long, since Endgame probably. Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. This is the epic conclusion to the Star Wars Skywalker saga. It picks up a while after The Last Jedi with Kylo Ren as the supreme leader of the First Order. He is trying to find the source of a mysterious signal apparently sent from Emperor Palpatine at the beginning of this movie, and that's where we're dropped in. I thought that this movie was a phenomenal ending to the Star Wars saga and had all the things that make Star Wars great. It has an amazing score, fantastic action, stunning effects, and really, really solid world building. I love that they still continue to build out this world even in the final installment. They could have very easily just settled for the world that they had and wrapped everything up there, but we get new planets, we get new characters, we get new aliens, we get new everything, new droids. Daisy Ridley's performance as Rey is elevated so much from the previous two films, and her character's arc is the best part of this story in my opinion. She is just on another level as far as her acting goes in this movie, having to deal with this fact that she is one of the last people with force sensitivity to her knowledge, and balancing, do I stay in the light or do I go to the dark that's calling me? Adam Driver continues his domination of 2019 with his best Star Wars performance to date. There's a lot of making up for the mess that was left after The Last Jedi, in my opinion, and they answer some long-time Star Wars questions, and a lot of issues are answered in a very satisfying way. All of Carrie Fisher's scenes are amazing. They feel in no way out of place, and they all feel brand new, even though it's all just unused footage from the previous movies. They were able to put in this incredibly compelling story that if you didn't know that Carrie Fisher was gone, that there's really no way to tell that she was. The new uses of the Force are amazing. I love them. I know that there's a lot of controversy online right now about the new Force abilities that we see in this movie, but I think that they are totally welcome, and I love them. There are several surprises that'll shock you in this movie, and a lot of them have already divided fans and critics alike. Some of the jokes don't always land, but that can be forgiven by the jokes that do land, because those are really, really funny. There are a couple of things that don't pay off in the end that are set up that I really would have liked to see pay off, but unfortunately we didn't get to see what happened there. Ultimately, I had a blast with Rise of Skywalker. I found it to be a near perfect ending to one of the greatest stories in cinema history, and I have to give Episode 9 a 4.5 out of 5.
So for me, this movie is the best of the Disney trilogy. That might not sound like super high praise because you may not love The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi, but I think that this movie rights a lot of the wrongs that The Last Jedi left in its place. This movie moves at an incredible breakneck speed. The pacing is so incredibly fast. There's so much going on, but it never feels like it's too much, and it's never even close to boring for a second. It's always flying by at this insane speed. It doesn't feel like 2:22, which is how long it is, one of the longer Star Wars movies, but it flies by. There are a lot of story elements in this movie. Obviously, we can't spoil them here, but they really, really worked for me. This movie did a lot of the things I wanted it to do and even exceeded those. It, like you were saying, it invented new things. It kept introducing new things with the Force and still introducing new planets, and it's awesome that JJ still felt the need to do that, because that's what's so important to Star Wars for me, is adding new stuff to it and the exploration of the world and of this universe. The best achievement this movie accomplished is it made me care about characters that, quite frankly, I didn't care about. I didn't really care very much about Rey after The Last Jedi. I didn't give a shit about what happened to Finn or Poe. I hated both of them after The Last Jedi. I didn't really care for either of them in The Force Awakens. This movie made me care about them. Like, this movie really, really does a lot of character development work that is fantastic. It brings on these people like me that I only really cared about Kylo Ren going into this movie, and leaving this movie, I love all these characters that I was left with, and that I can even look back on this journey of Force Awakens and The Last Jedi with more fondness because of this movie. It feels more like a prequel than one of the sequel movies, and for a lot of people that might not be a good thing. For me, that's an amazing thing, because the prequels, to me, like you were saying, they represent introduction of new ideas. That is what the prequels are, and that's what this movie is constantly introducing new ideas. Ian McDiarmid was born to play the Emperor. He's back in this movie, and he absolutely crushes it like he always does. You expect nothing less, but even being away from this role for as long as he has been, he comes back and he's still giving 100% with the full voice, and the dialogue they have written for the Emperor is so perfect for his character. It all works for me. So ultimately, this movie for me was extremely satisfying. It was a very satisfying ending to the entire saga, to all 9 of these movies. And I got to give this movie a 4 out of 5. There were just a couple of things, like some of the jokes didn't work super well for me. And then just kind of overall, because of this trilogy, there are just a couple of things I don't really fully care about. And that's not really a fault of this movie, but that's a fault of the previous 2. But for this one, I'm going 4 out of 5.
Cool. Fair enough. So the other movie that we saw in theaters this week was very, very different from Star Wars. We saw Cats. This is
why, you might ask. For you, dear listener.
Yes,
for you.
Exactly. We saw it so you don't have to. This movie is about a group of cats preparing for a ball, and that's about all the plot there is, because this fucking movie has nothing but character introduction songs and awkward dance sequences. This is the second worst film I have seen all year, only second to John Travolta's The Fanatic, and we had to use a lifeline on this movie. We decided that there was one movie a year that we are allowed to walk out of after we've given it a fair shot. We made it a little over an hour into this movie, and could not take it anymore. So we had to leave. This movie was nothing. It was absolutely nothing. We got over an hour into it. We had no idea what was going on. There was no plot whatsoever. It was literally nothing but new cats being introduced, singing a song about who they are and what kind of cat they are, and then a dance sequence. And then another cat shows up, and then randomly Idris Elba shows up and disappears into fairy dust after doing nefarious things, and it's just like, what's going on? The movie doesn't make any sense. The visuals are absolutely terrifying. I hated the music in this movie. I love musicals, and I was not familiar with the music from Cats except for the song Memory, but I have no idea how this was one of the most popular musicals ever on Broadway, because it's awful, frankly. There was still another 45 minutes left in this movie whenever we left, and I have no clue what they could have done to at least start some sort of plot. It makes no sense at all. The opening song repeats over and over about something called Jellicle cats, and this becomes a theme in the other songs and dialogue, and if I ever hear that word again, I'm going to lose my mind, because it's literally said probably, 30, 40, 50 times in that hour and whatever minutes that we saw the movie?
Oh, more than that.
It's ridiculous. There's a scene where Ian McKellen is in this movie, is in the scene and literally just yells meow, 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 and it's one of the funniest things that I've seen all year, even though I know it wasn't supposed to be funny. Overall, this movie made no sense at all. It had no plot, terrifying visuals, awful performances, terrible music. I gotta give Cats a 0 out of 5.
0 out of 5. Your
I
first
have to.
zero. There
My
you
first
go, man.
0.
I used mine on 6 Underground, so I'm not really sure if I can use a 0 again, but this movie really tried damn hard to get there. So
yeah.
What the jellicle fuck is wrong with this movie? That's the first question I want to ask. This movie is mind-numbingly bad. It's literally just character introductions for the entire plot, the entire runtime, or as far as we made it. The jokes in this are the most broad attempts at humor that you've ever heard in your life.
Cat got your tongue?
Get it? Do you get it, Bradley? It's a cat. A cat got its tongue, and we're watching Cats. So a cat got its tongue, and then remember whenever Jason Derulo yelled out milk?
Oh, yeah.
Because you get it? Because cats like milk. It's hilarious. If you guys just think about this, it's one of the greatest cinematic achievements. No, this movie's fucking terrible. Like, it's terrifying. There are 2 cat songs that have fat cats that are just about how they're fat cats. There are cockroaches can dancing. Like, I don't give a shit. You guys don't care about spoilers for this. Nobody cares about spoilers for this, so I'm not gonna give a shit.
Breaking the rules.
The music is like nails on a fucking chalkboard. It is terrible. It was pissing me off. It was making me angry as the movie was going on. Everyone thinks they're in a different movie here. So James Corden and Rebel Wilson think they're in a broad comedy. Jennifer Hudson thinks that she's in Les Mis or La La Land because she is like full on crying, snotting out of her nose, like just giving it she thinks this is her Anne Hathaway Les Mis one shot, and it doesn't make any sense. Ian McKellen thinks he's in a movie called Cats because he's just pretending to be a cat. He's just grooming himself and meowing in the background. There was a little girl sitting with her mom watching this movie in the theater next to me. The little girl leaned over to her mom at one point and said, "Mommy, I don't want to look at this anymore." And that's exactly how I feel about this movie.
I've never identified with someone more than I identified with that little girl in that moment.
Jason Derulo has this accent in this movie that sounds like Dick Van Dyke in Mary Poppins, but worse. It's somehow a worse British accent than that. He sings with a British accent, which is so strange because even British people don't really sing with a British accent. So it's so bizarre whenever he does it. Judi Dench, we've seen the unfinished version. We should say that because apparently there's a newer version with updated visuals, because Judi Dench in this movie just has her regular ass human hand with her wedding ring on it, and there's no fur on it or anything. This movie is extremely horny, and it's weird how horny it is. It feels like a movie made by furries for furries, and I'm not really into that. It's a painful movie experience, but the only reason I'm going to give this movie a 0.5 out of 5, the only reason it's not getting a 0 is because Ian McKellen literally goes meow meow meow, and if the movie gave us that at the very least, then it deserves better than a 0.
I can respect that. It made me laugh a lot whenever he just started meowing. So moving to what's playing at home this week, we've got 2 great movies to talk about. Over at Netflix, we had The Two Popes premiere. The Two Popes is based on a conversation that takes place over a couple of days between Pope Benedict and Pope Francis prior to Benedict's resignation. Blake, what did you think about this movie?
I really, really enjoyed this movie. I think that it's a very, very... it's a slow movie. It's not necessarily extremely exciting. It's literally just a conversation over 2 or 3 days between these two, the Pope and then the incoming Pope. Their conversations and their battles of ideology, but within the Catholic religion and within what God wanted to teach, is so engaging. Their conversations are so insanely well written, and these are 2 of the best actors of all time giving it their all, just in powerhouse performances here. And they have to they speak in so many different languages in this movie. They speak in Latin at a certain point in this movie, and it is incredibly impressive how well they're able to slide back and forth between English and Spanish and Latin. Even for someone who isn't, I'm not Catholic. Bradley and I are not Catholic. We were brought up in a Baptist church. I don't know a lot about the Catholic Church or anything like that. This movie was insanely entertaining, even for me, even for someone who doesn't know hardly anything about like how the voting works or cardinals or any of that stuff. It does a good enough job of quickly explaining that stuff for people that don't know, aren't fully immersed in this world. It does a good job of explaining that very quickly, and then you kind of understand that, like, because even if you're not religious or you're not part of any of these things, you don't know anything about this, there's still core questions and problems that are brought up in this movie, and ideological, theological battles that conversations that should be happening, and they're very important conversations. This movie feels like a very important movie. All of it does. There is very, very beautiful scenery in this movie that just makes for a beautiful garden that they're walking through while they have a conversation. It just makes for a very pleasant movie watching experience. I think the cinematography is very good in this movie. Only complaint is it's a little bit too long for me, just a little bit, maybe like 10 more minutes would have felt a lot tighter. In the middle, it drags just a touch. But overall, this movie has some of the best acting I've seen all year. These are two of the best actors of all time, and I think that this is maybe Jonathan Pryce's best performance that I've ever seen him give. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see him get nominated for an Oscar this year. I'm going to go a 4 out of 5 for the Two Popes.
Awesome. So I love the performances in this movie. Just to echo what you say, Anthony Hopkins plays Pope Benedict and Jonathan Pryce plays Pope Francis, and they are just a marvel to watch together. These are two master actors at work, and both of their performances are among the best of the year, hands down. There's not much plot other than these two discussing their differences and desire for change within the Catholic Church and the world as a whole. But this isn't a bad thing, because seeing Pryce and Hopkins on screen together is just nothing short of electric. The cinematography is really interesting in this movie. It's shot almost like the Bourne movies or like a Catherine Bigelow film. Mm-hmm. It has super intense close-ups and zoom-ins that sometimes feel out of place, but they work very well for overall. Especially in spots where tensions are high between the two characters. It works very, very well. Ultimately, I think that this contains some of the best acting of the year, and it's definitely worth your time whether you are a religious person or not. It has some very interesting questions and ideas that it raises. I have to give the Two Popes a 4 out of 5 as well.
Awesome.
So another movie that we have playing on home release is on Disney Plus is the film Togo. This is the true story of a dog sled team led by the heroic Togo that traveled over 200 miles during a storm to deliver a life-saving serum to the town of Nome, Alaska. What did you think about Togo?
So this movie is another movie in the very, very long line of this subgenre of dog movie that is sled dog movies. We've had dozens and dozens of these. They kind of get tired after a while, and they're kind of nothing. Most of these, there are a lot of them that just go straight to DVD or that are sequels. This movie is easily the best that's been in that subgenre ever. This is one of my favorite movies of the year. This movie is incredibly emotionally impactful and powerful. I think that the lead dog that plays Togo, or the group of dogs, because sometimes it's multiple dogs that play them in these movies, some of the best dog acting I've ever seen. The training is just incredible for this dog. This dog, Togo, is able to emote and display more spirit and passion and emotion than a lot of human characters I've seen in movies this year, and it's incredible. I think that Willem Dafoe does such a good job playing with these dogs. You really believe his love and his passion that he has for them, and the respect that he has for his dogs as well is infectious. Incredible special effects. Wow, this movie looks beautiful. The color palette, the cinematography, the visual effects of whenever they're going through really, really difficult terrain, it all looks beautiful. Like, I want to see this movie in IMAX. I think that if it's possible at all to see this movie on the big screen, then see it. I don't think it is, but watch it on the biggest screen possible, because it really, really does look stunning, especially for an anime or for a streaming movie. Streaming movies is usually they feel kind of lower budget, but we're getting to that point now where I think that we can get these effects heavy driven movies, and they can look just as good as anything that's in theaters, and this movie proves that. I think that this movie has a very good supporting cast. He's coming across different characters. I don't know any of the actors' names, but I think that the characters he comes across are very good actors, and that was a big standout to me. It was just the supporting cast that he keeps coming across. No one was a bad actor in this movie. It just kind of all surprised me. Like, when you watch a streaming service movie, for me, a lot of the time it's like, this part feels a little low budget, or this person in this part wasn't as strong of an actor or whatever, but this movie feels just as much of a theatrical experience as I've seen all year. Overall, this movie is very emotionally powerful, and it's, I think, expertly written and very well acted by Willem Dafoe and the dog. I'm going 4.5 out of 5. I think the last half hour of this movie is superb. It is outstanding.
Yeah, this ultimately is a story of the bond that exists between dogs and their people, and it's extremely moving, had me in tears multiple times. The action in this movie is edge-of-your-seat stuff, and like Blake was saying, the effects are surprisingly great for a home release movie. I would have loved to have seen this get a theatrical release as well. I would have loved to have seen this on the big screen. The action is definitely deserving of the big screen. Willem Dafoe is phenomenal as always. He's stern but has a place in his heart for his dogs, and especially Togo. The pacing is incredible in this movie. It's nearly 2 hours long and it just flies by. It feels like an hour. This is one of my favorite films I've seen all year. I'm a big dog person. I think anyone who loves dogs needs to see this movie. It's got some of the best animal acting that I've ever seen in a movie. Just incredible amounts of training that had to go into making this as effective as it was. I think that anyone who's a fan of true stories of heroism need to see this, because it's pretty much an untold story, but it's about one of the most heroic acts that I've ever heard of. I got to give Togo a 4.5 out of 5 as well.
Nice.
So there you go. We got 4 movies for you this week. We've got Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, we've got Cats, we've got The Two Popes, and we've got Togo. Any other thoughts on any of the movies that we saw this week, Blake?
You've already seen Rise of Skywalker. Don't go see Cats. Maybe just stay home and watch The Two Popes and Togo this week. Like, if you got kids, if you have a dog, if you've had a dog at any point in your life, watch this movie. It's gonna impact you. It's very, very good.
I could not agree more. So thank you so much for joining us for another episode. We'll be back next week with more thoughts on what to watch. Until then, be sure to subscribe, give us a review, and we will see you next time.